Hello, if you've listened to part 2, you'll know that a great deal of effort was done to sabotage one of my hobbies that I spent a lot of time on, if not all my spare time on, which was singing. As you've listened to part 2, you'll know that a musician was sent to work with me, and eventually it was all revealed as sabotage. I was set up in a situation deliberately to induce disappointment. These people must have listened and known the very genre of music that I liked, made sure that the music they approached me with was very, very similar to the music that I wanted to do and that I listened to and I was influenced by, in order to get me to want to do this work, to do it. So they've obviously researched that. They approached me with that. And I was working a lot on it. That's the type of person I am. And I was obviously put into a situation to cause disappointment, long-term disappointment. It was a long-term situation to cause disappointment in the end, in some way. It was they offered me this production company to open the option of opening a production company for our songs, and they needed a joint bank account, which I would only do legally with a lawyer, and they dragged their heels about that, and then this musician did, and then eventually they started saying they could do it themselves, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be done with a lawyer. And obviously that never materialised. Various things were said, and they wanted my bank details. Not my bank details, sorry. They wanted me to open a joint bank account, which would have probably only ended in more sabotage at some point, or getting me set up for something. So I didn't go for that. But I'd obviously been involved in a situation to elicit disappointment. From their perspective, they'd offered me everything they thought I wanted. They'd offered me the very genre of music, which is a very particular genre of music, alternative rock, very, very particular. They'd offered me that. They thought, right, yeah. So I'd taken the bit, the biscuit, whatever, the bait. I'd gone for that, and then I was working really hard on it. So they had that, and then they had all this stuff in the backgrounds which I didn't know about. And then at some point they'd let me know. So that was supposed to create massive disappointment, you know. It didn't really. It was just shocking what they'd done, but it didn't create massive disappointment. So they thought they could second guess what I wanted, and that they was offering me what I would think was the world, you know, everything that I've always wanted. They would offer it me, and then they would sabotage it, you know. Well, one of the comments that gave a bit away on that was when this musician said to me, I thought you wanted to be famous, and I've never ever said that. It's never anything that I've wanted. So I said to him, "Who told you that?" I didn't tell you that, and he just looked so confused, and he looked away. So that was obviously what they thought I wanted, and they was trying to do that and make me, you know, to the disappointment nonsense. Because you can't be disappointed about something you've never had, can you? You can't take something away from somebody if they've never had it. So that's what they were trying to do, sort of set up. And I'll talk about some of the other things that they did as well. The techniques, the typical Stasi techniques. I was in my studio on my own. I'd make some music up. I'd sing a melody, or I'd play something on the keyboards, and then I'd get home. Within a few days, I'd hear that coming from upstairs. If I'd sang the melody or the tune, if I was coming up with something that way, they would play it upstairs on single notes on the guitar. Or if it was something I came up on the keyboard, what happened is I was messing around on the keyboard, and I had this little tune there, and it wasn't really anything. I just dismissed it, but I did record it. The week after, the musician met up with me, and he just, how about this? And he just played it, the same bloody melody in single notes on the keyboard. How weird is that? That's a form of mirroring, isn't it? It's a typical Stasi technique. Another time I went to a private studio after all this, after I'd got rid of this person, By got rid of, I mean stopped working with, let's get very clear on that. I went to a private studio, and I no longer had my own. They actually, this is going to be hard to believe, but I'll just tell you quickly and then I'll come back to it. They actually, they tried to gang stalk me out of it, and that didn't work. They just kept coming in there at night, making a load of noise. They used an amp and a CB radio to harass me. If you know anything about speakers, you'll know that long speaker cables act as antennae, and an amp and a CB radio, they was putting things through my PA, which I thought is a lot more sinister, but what I thought at the time was just harassment. So they tried all that. They tried coming in to frighten me, making a lot of noise around. I found when I was recording stuff on the back-ins, there was stuff on the back-ins, insults, comments, which must have come through the amp and the CB radio, pardon me, method. Right, okay, I go to this, and there was horrendous microwave levels. They just made you feel sick. You felt physically sick, which had never happened until this musician came to work with me at my studio. I'd been there a while, at least a year before, maybe about 6 months, 8 months before about a year before he turned up. And I got a microwave detector and a radio frequency detector, and the point where I always stood, I turned all the electricity off in the studio, and the point where I stood to sing, that registered like dangerous levels, get away. So did the seat where I sat at my computer to do the editing. So did the sofa where I would sit and have a break. Those 3 spots were saturated with radio frequencies and microwaves, and you just feel so ill and so sick. When I looked to one of the big windows where I followed the trail from the detector where they was coming from, there didn't seem to be anything there. It just seemed to be like there's a yard, where something maybe hidden in the yard. I don't know what's causing this. And on the other side of the building there was a huge antenna, a bit off, with a massive dish on it, pointing directly in that way. I thought, is this just an accident? Because I feel actually physically sick, and your head would feel all fuzzy, and you would literally feel like you was wearing an electric helmet. You could feel it going, you could actually, when you came out of there, all my electrics were fine. Like I said, I turned everything off at the mains before I did the scan with the microwave detector, the radio frequency detector. So you just couldn't be in there for 5 minutes without feeling sick. You just felt really, really ill when you was in there. And another thing that they did as well was my music started to sound very, very bright, and they was putting extra frequencies through the speakers. I think about 15,000 kilohertz. And that was at 120 decibels. I did it on Audacity mass spectrum, plot spectrum, and I put it through. I wanted to know what these frequencies. I couldn't EQ them out. I was trying everything. They was coming after the compressor. They was coming through the cables, through the speakers. They was being put through with an amp and a CB radio. And these gang stalkers were kind enough to turn up outside my window and shout that before I became aware of it. We're building an amp for soundproof systems. What? Blow it through all the equipment? Yeah, there'll be some miracle gig. Then it's time for a haircut. Made absolutely no sense whatsoever until this started happening. Then I realised that the only way you can do that is with an amp and a CB radio. So my system wasn't soundproofed. So anyway, I'll try and cut this short. It's a bit unbelievable, but it's true. So I looked, and when I did the plot spectrum, the frequencies, throughout a whole track, you had one peak at about 100 decibels or something at 14.5k, which would really seriously damage your hearing. I'd noticed my music was sounding unusually bright. But you've got to remember, at my age, that is just slightly above my level of hearing, just slightly on the peak. So it would just sound like a brightness, which it did. This is what I found out afterwards when I looked into it. I knew I was suffering, but I didn't know why, and I found out. How long had it been going on for? Probably months. The low frequencies, up from 40 hertz down to 0, as low as the plot spectrum graph will go, were 126 decibels. That is a hell of a lot of energy, and that was throughout the whole track. I can't hear that low, So there was some very, very low. How I used to record that and put that through Audacity to plot the spectrum was with a room mic. And it was a very, very wide frequency mic. So I put the mic in the middle of the room. And again, these frequencies weren't feedback because I was using a feedback destroyer. These frequencies came after the feedback destroyer. They also did something to my microphone, so it acted as a speaker. So when I was singing, it wasn't coming out of the PA speakers. You had to keep turning it up, and all the time you're deafening yourself. Your ears are going to fall off. They're burning. Why? Because the wires have been swapped over inside the microphone to turn it into a speaker. I didn't even know that was possible. So they damaged my hearing in 2 ways. I now have very, very bad tinnitus. There's other things involved as well. That I don't know how they've done it, but I know how the symptoms arose and when they arose from. And they may fall into the category of acoustic weapons or electronic weapons. This stabbing sensation in my ears, very, very painful. I went to the hospital, and I must say the noise floor, I'll just say this, when I looked at those 2 frequencies that stood out, the noise floor was only about 70 decibels, which is loud, but it's not loud enough to damage your hearing in a big room like that, nowhere near. And you got 120, 126 decibel peaks at a very specific frequency, and the other one all throughout the lower spectrum of frequencies. Abnormal, totally abnormal. They've been put in. So anyway, I go to the accident emergency. I've never had any trouble with my hearing. I've got absolutely perfect hearing. Always use ear protection and singing and going to gigs. So they look at my ears. They say, your eardrums are very inflamed, but there's no infection. And they just feel like they're on fire and they're being stabbed. They just feel like my eardrums are being stabbed. I'm in so much pain. And at the same time, I've got this electric feeling. It's hard to explain, but that's something crazy. On my head, and it's burning and stinging. And it just feels like my whole head is electrified. And I've got this high-pitched tone, pardon me. And it's like a hiss. But it doesn't sound like it's coming from my ears. It sounds like it's coming from my head. Prior to that, two weeks before that, I had excruciating pain in my head, like my brains were being ripped apart. I can't even explain the pain, but my hearing was fine. Then about 10 days, 2 weeks afterwards, that started happening with my ears, and it's continued ever since. I have extremely bad sensitivity to sound, so if I listen to some music, which I used to love going to concerts and stuff, and if I listen to some music, I have to wear a lot of heavy-duty ear protection, otherwise it will just set my ears off ringing, this incredibly loud tone. You know, this is so sudden. Since that. So you had those 2. I'll explain this other method of sabotage, where I went to a private studio after not working there anymore. It was making me really, really ill. I went to another one, and everything was fine the first time. The second time, in the room next door to me, one of the songs that I was working on with the musician, remember I told you about the musician that sent me them tracks? One of the songs that I was working on, the people in the next room, the band, were playing it. They was rehearsing that song. They was playing it. It was the same 4 or 5 chords, the same sequence, the same everything. The only difference was they didn't have a distortion pedal on it. They were playing that in the next room. And then they started singing a song which was very derogatory. It could have been about me, but let's not be paranoid. Then you can hear the banging from upstairs. They were doing a lot of banging. So what happened then is I'm in this studio, and then through my speakers, they must have brought their amp and the CB radio with them, because they sabotage it when I'm doing my singing in this private studio. They put one of the phrases that I said when I saw my dead cat through the PA with the amp and the CB radio. Now, if you've listened to my previous recordings, you'll know that this is a common form of sabotage that they've been doing. I started to listen back to recordings that had been done before I became aware of what was going on with the tracks I was sent, and even my own tracks had stuff like that in the backs. So they've been doing it a long time before they let me know that they was doing it, and before I became aware of it. And virtually all the tracks had some form of sabotage or abusive or comments in the background that must have only been coming through that method, because when I was singing live in that studio, that came through the PA. So that must be the method of doing it. Also because they put the tones through my PA as well. to damage my hearing. There couldn't have been any other way, unless it's some form of electronic mind control, you know, that they was really pumping up the volume on. I can't understand why anyone would do that. Yeah, I mean, I can't understand why they would do it anyway, but you understand what I'm saying? It's comprehensible, but it's not understandable. So those are some of the ways. Also, incidentally, it may be interesting to note that this musician who contacted me with these tracks, his email was his name at his email was stonedeaf at, and then his you know, the email domain. I can't say that obviously. Stone deaf. You know, and those things were done. Just a coincidence, maybe. Just a coincidence that things were on the back ends of the tracks that he sent me. Just a coincidence. So many coincidences. However, those are some of the ways that they tried to sabotage my singing. And because obviously it's a major hobby of mine, it's something I love, something I spend a lot of time and energy on. They want to stop me from doing it for whatever reason. The more happier society is, the individuals in society, the better the society is. Yes, according to these people, you make people unhappy, you have a better society. How weird is that? I was going down to my relative's house on Christmas Day. I was approached by two young lads who I've never seen in my entire life, like 14 years old, on push bikes. And they come up to me and they said to me, "You won't be singing again." I don't even know these people. How do they know that I sing anyway? They just came up and said that to me. There's been a lot of instances of directed conversation, a lot of instances of mimicking in extreme forms. One particular occasion, I went 200 miles away for a break. I went on holiday. I got some harassment similar to the harassment I got here. I've been there a few days, and it was in the middle of a nature reserve, and it was coming from the car park, and other people heard this as well, and it was the same thing shouted, and the mimicking. I got this girl that's mimicking my body language and stuff, and I had this CD, and she took an interest in it, and she said she never heard it before. And I said, "Oh, it's good, you know." And what she did was, the day after, she started humming one of the songs on this CD that she's never heard of before. It was quite new at the time. And I asked her what she was humming. She said she didn't know. And then a bit after, she started humming it again, and this way all the way through. And I asked her what she was humming. She said she didn't know. And I asked her again, "Is it this? Is it that?" And she said she didn't know. So to say she hadn't heard this, and for her to do that, and she was also the person mirroring my body language. Those are classic Stasi techniques, as is the mirroring. When I played some music on my keyboard, and then when I met up with the musician, he said, "Oh, how about this?" And then he played exactly the same thing that I'd played the week before when he wasn't there. You know? It's classic Stasi stuff. Right, okay. So, a lot of the stuff that I've recorded has got stuff in the backings, and I've only just become aware of it, that they was doing it all along, you know? Why would you set somebody up like that to give them what you believe is everything that they want, and then set them up to give disappointment, to destroy it? Why would you do that? You'd only do that as a form of mind control. Behaviour modifications to create trauma as mind control. Because you can disappoint or annoy people a lot easier than that. And using the subliminals as well. And some of the comments I heard do point to that. They do point to that. Right. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you. Thank you. Bye.